Well, welcome to the Coach's Corner. Hi, I'm Frank Barbahan, and I'll be your discipleship coach for this week. Last time I mentioned that both the Apostle Paul and the Apostle James said that we can have joy through our suffering, through our trials, through our troubles. What I want to do in this video is look at how it is that suffering robs us of happiness and sets us up for failure. And then subsequently, we'll look at what we can do about that. So how suffering robs us of our happiness. The first one is that suffering drains us of our energy. If, for example, if we've been through a tough childhood where there were a lot of interpersonal difficulties within the family system, that can be sitting in your intrapsychic craw, works on you in the background even though you're an adult, and robs you of energy. Somebody who has been traumatized in their adult life and that trauma has not been resolved, that plays on them and robs them of their energy. So then the second way it impacts us is that the energy we have left over may not be a whole lot. And either from a deeply unconscious position from our childhood, or if something has traumatized us more recently, or something softer, current suffering that we're going through, that can preoccupy our mind and we cannot concentrate. Another is that we can have suffering that overwhelms our mental skills to deal with it. We can be pushed to the max and don't know where to go. And that place where we're right at the edge becomes a very scary place. My own mother and father really never developed the mental skills to deal with what they went through. My father was a paraplegic, then quadriplegic with multiple sclerosis. My mother then drank heavily. She was an alcoholic. She never developed the mental skills to deal with what had happened to them with her lost dreams. My father escaped into cigarette smoking, chain smoking, nicotine, and into sports, watching it on television as a paraplegic and quadriplegic, and he never developed the mental skills to go beyond where he was. In contrast, Christopher Reeve, some of you may know as Superman, and many years ago, he had a horseback riding accident, broke his neck, and he became quadriplegic. He actually hired a psychologist to help him develop the mental skills, along with his wife Dana, in order to create a life for themselves. And to his credit, he did. Suffering, if it's intense enough, pushing us over the edge, can induce spontaneous suicidal fantasies. And unless we learn how to decode those suicidal fantasies, we can end up playing it out. So Robin Williams played it out and committed suicide. And as many of you know, the son of Rick Warren, the pastor and author of the book Purpose Driven Life, his son committed suicide. So their suffering pushed them over the edge, induced spontaneous suicidal fantasies, and they acted them out instead of decoding them. The other major thing that suffering can bring us is the dark night of the soul. As we're wrestling with the suffering, we don't have much energy left over for living life. We can feel as if God has abandoned us. We don't feel God's presence. We feel like God doesn't care about us. In fact, we may wonder if God exists at all. Along with that, we can feel like our suffering doesn't have any particular meaning, and we can feel like life in general doesn't have any meaning for us. Mother Teresa is sadly a good example of this dark night of the soul. Posthumously, they discovered in her letters to her spiritual director that most of her life, about 50 years, she felt like she was abandoned by God, did not experience God, did not experience his care, and on and off wrestled with whether or not he even existed. So, suffering really can rob us of our happiness and puts us behind the eight ball. Now, there are some Christians who try to find solace in Romans 8:28. And in 8:28, the Apostle Paul says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. Many people think that that means then that all of what you go through, God has a wonderful purpose for it. C.S. Lewis seemed to have wrestled with that as well. However, it's not what the apostle is saying. The apostle is saying that the good that God pulls out of it is that he calls us, and we are justified in Jesus Christ, meaning our sins are forgiven. And we are in the process of being sanctified, and then when we die, we will be resurrected, we will be glorified. That's the panoramic that the Apostle Paul is talking about. So everything is going to work for our justification and our being resurrected from the dead. So if I were to die right now during this videotaping, I would remain asleep until the resurrection. But I'm guaranteed that I will be resurrected from the dead. That's the good. No matter what happens in my life, I am called by him, I'm saved by him, and I will be resurrected. That's the comfort. The comfort is not that all of my suffering has some divine meaning to it. In fact, on a final note, I had a professor from seminary who was kind of dry to listen to, but one time he looked up from his notes, and we were talking about suffering and evil, and he looked right at us. He looked at me on his left, and then to each student that was in front of him. There were only 5 of us in his small class. And he said, "Men, maybe part of what makes evil evil is that it's just nuts." And I've remembered those words ever since. It was like a bullet between my young eyes. That, yeah, maybe part of what makes suffering so unbearable is that it really is just nuts. Well, we're going to leave it on that morbid note. And the next 2 videos look at how do we climb up and out from there. Any questions, let me know at Frank at peakperformancediscipleship.com, Frank at peakperformancediscipleship.com, and we'll see you next week.